The summer sun had barely climbed over the horizon when Marcus Johnson loaded his fishing gear into his old pickup truck, humming softly to himself. The lake behind his modest home had always been his sanctuary, a quiet refuge where the ripples of water and the gentle sway of the trees offered a reprieve from the pressures of life. Fishing wasn't just a hobby for Marcus, it was a ritual, a connection to the land, to his ancestors, and to a sense of peace that city life rarely afforded him. But that morning, as he unpacked his rod and bait near the familiar shoreline, a sharp voice shattered the calm. "Sir, you're not allowed to fish here," a man called out, clipboard in hand, wearing the emblem of the Homeowners Association. Marcus looked up, his brow furrowing. "Excuse me," he said, his tone calm but steady. The man stepped closer, handing him a notice with a flourish, as if presenting a decree. "This is a fine. Unauthorized fishing. $50. Marcus felt the weight of the paper in his hands. $50. A trivial amount in the grand scheme of life, yet the principle cut deeper than any monetary value could. For years, he had respected the community rules, paid his dues, and followed the regulations. Yet here he was, being treated as if his very presence on the lake, a place that had nurtured him, was illegitimate. He glanced around at the other residents, their faces a mix of curiosity and judgment. None of them intervened. None offered support. The quiet injustice of it all made his chest tighten. That evening, Marcus sat on his porch, staring at the lake's reflective surface, feeling a simmering anger that mingled with clarity. He could have paid the fine, let it go, and moved on. Many would have. But he was Marcus Johnson, a man who had spent decades building his life through resilience, hard work, and an unwavering belief that dignity is non-negotiable. The fine wasn't about fishing. It was about ownership, about respect, and about a system that too often undermined black men even in the simplest of acts. He began to plan. Not out of vengeance, but out of justice. Not out of malice, but out of a desire to reclaim what had always belonged to him. He researched property records, land deeds, and zoning laws. By the end of the week, Marcus had discovered that the lake itself, the very heart of his summer sanctuary, was not entirely owned by the HOA, but by a private trust that had been neglected and underutilized. The realization sparked an idea, one that was both audacious and entirely within his rights. Within months, through careful negotiation and strategic investment, Marcus acquired the lake. It was a masterstroke, the culmination of patience, intellect, and determination. The lake was no longer a place where he could be fined for simply enjoying nature. It was now legally his. And with ownership came the authority to redefine its use. A chance to send a message without ever raising a hand in anger, to assert dignity without descending into pettiness. The first day Marcus walked down to the lake as its rightful owner, the same HOA representatives who had fined him for fishing were waiting, their faces frozen in recognition and disbelief. He greeted them with calm courtesy, handing over a beautifully printed notice. It was concise, formal, and devastatingly clear: the lake was private property. Entry by the neighborhood residents would require permission, which would not be granted. Fishing, boating, or recreational use by the HOA members was now prohibited. Word spread quickly. The news of Marcus's acquisition became the talk of the community. People whispered behind gates and through hedges about the man who had been fined for casting a line, only to become the master of the very water they had taken for granted. Some were indignant, some were awestruck, but all recognized the audacity of the act. The quiet, unshakable power of a man asserting his rights. Marcus, however, remained focused not on the attention, but on the principle. He had not acquired the lake out of spite. He had acquired it to claim his dignity and to demonstrate that fairness, respect, and justice cannot be taken lightly. Every ripple across the lake's surface reflected his triumph, a testament to what happens when patience, intellect, and resolve converge in the service of equity. The HOA, predictably, attempted to challenge him. Lawyers were consulted, meetings were held, and arguments were made about community access and historical usage. But Marcus had done his homework. Every document was in order, every transaction meticulously recorded. The courts, after reviewing the evidence, sided with Marcus unanimously. Ownership was indisputable. The lake, that place of peace, reflection, and memory, was legally and unequivocally his. As he stood by the water, watching the sunlight dance across the surface, Marcus felt a profound sense of closure. It wasn't vengeance that filled him, but affirmation. He had taken what was unfairly challenged, and with patience, skill, and integrity, he had turned a moment of discrimination into a lasting victory. The lake was no longer a site of conflict, but a monument to perseverance, resilience, and black excellence. From that day forward, Marcus maintained the lake with care, welcoming only those he chose, and ensuring that the lessons of fairness and respect were clear. For the residents of the neighborhood, the lesson was unmistakable: when you underestimate someone based on assumptions, you may find that the consequence is far greater than you ever imagined. And for Marcus, it was a reminder that justice is not always swift, but it is inevitable for those who pursue it with courage and dignity. He had transformed a petty fine into a story of empowerment, a legacy that would resonate far beyond the lake's reflective waters, a story that would be shared, celebrated, and retold for years to come, exemplifying the unyielding strength of black life in the face of discrimination. Word of Marcus Johnson's bold acquisition spread like wildfire through the neighborhood. The HOA board members who had once delivered the fine for a simple act of fishing now found themselves facing a reality they hadn't anticipated. The man they had dismissed, treated as if his presence on the lake was somehow improper, had turned the situation entirely on its head. Their protests, their complaints, even their veiled attempts at intimidation, now seemed petty and insignificant in the shadow of Marcus's calculated authority. The first morning after the ownership transfer, Marcus arrived at the lake to see the neighborhood residents gathered along the fence, whispering and pointing. Some looked angry, others bewildered, and a few had the humility to look genuinely chastened. The lake, once a communal area under HOA control, now belonged solely to him, and the change was tangible. No longer did the residents stroll casually to the shore, no longer did their boats glide freely across the water. Marcus had set firm boundaries, not out of malice, but to reinforce a critical lesson about respect, fairness, and the consequences of underestimating someone based on prejudice. Several residents attempted to negotiate. "Marcus, maybe we can work out shared access," they asked, their tones ranging from hopeful to insistent. Marcus listened, nodding politely, but he remained firm. "The lake is private property," he said, his voice calm but resolute. "Permission to use it will not be granted. This is not personal. This is a matter of principle." The quiet authority in his words was unmistakable. He didn't need to shout. He didn't need to threaten. The clarity of his stance carried a weight that no argument could overcome. Social media amplified the story rapidly. Local news outlets ran segments on the black entrepreneur who had been fined for fishing and had responded by legally purchasing the very lake that had been the source of conflict. Clips of Marcus speaking about the importance of respect and ownership circulated widely, accompanied by headlines praising his intelligence, patience, and strategic thinking. Comments poured in from around the country, many praising Marcus's approach as a masterclass in turning injustice into empowerment. He didn't just fight back, he rewrote the rules. One viral comment read. Another noted, "This is how you respond to discrimination without losing your dignity." Marcus used this momentum not only to protect the lake but to reinforce broader lessons about fairness and justice. He organized community workshops on property rights, investment strategies, and conflict resolution. He encouraged younger black entrepreneurs to take ownership, literally and figuratively, of spaces they were told they didn't belong in. His story became a living example of how strategic thinking and moral clarity could turn moments of prejudice into lasting victories. Over time, the neighborhood came to accept the new reality, though grudgingly. The lake was no longer a source of casual enjoyment for HOA members but a symbol of Marcus's intellect, resilience, and uncompromising commitment to dignity. Children who once played near its banks watched respectfully from a distance, their parents teaching them about the consequences of underestimating others. For Marcus, the transformation of the lake was not only about personal triumph but about setting a precedent that fairness and justice must be acknowledged, or the balance of power can and will shift. Marcus also found personal fulfillment in the lake's restoration. He improved the shoreline, planted native vegetation, and stocked it with fish to ensure its long-term health. The lake became a sanctuary again, not just for him but for friends and family he invited with intention, for those who respected the principles it now represented. Each ripple across the water reflected a story of perseverance and triumph, a visual reminder that moments of injustice, when met with patience, courage, and intellect, can transform into enduring victories. Beyond the neighborhood, Marcus's story sparked wider conversations about systemic bias and the often overlooked consequences of microaggressions. Scholars, journalists, and activists cited the lake acquisition as a vivid example of how people of color could assert ownership in environments historically designed to exclude them. Marcus never sought fame or accolades, his goal was always fairness, respect, and the tangible restoration of dignity. Yet, through his actions, he inspired countless others to rethink how they respond to injustice and how they claim their rightful spaces in the world. In quiet moments, Marcus would sit by the water's edge, watching the sunlight dance across the surface, reflecting on how a simple act of fishing had sparked a journey of empowerment. He realized that the lake was more than a body of water, it was a symbol of patience, of strategic thinking, of unyielding dignity, and of the quiet, unwavering power of standing one's ground. The lake, once a point of conflict, had become a monument to justice achieved without anger, without violence, and without compromise. As the months passed, Marcus's story became woven into the fabric of the community's memory. The residents who had once dismissed him now approached with a mixture of respect and caution, recognizing the sharp intellect and calm authority that had guided every decision he made. The lake stood serene, a testament to resilience and foresight, reflecting both the sunlight and the enduring truth that justice, when pursued with integrity, can reshape landscapes, both physical and social. Ultimately, Marcus Johnson had accomplished more than just reclaiming access to a lake. He had reclaimed dignity, set a precedent for equitable treatment, and demonstrated to his community and the world that prejudice can be met not with fury, but with strategy, patience, and a steadfast commitment to principle. The story of the HOA, the fine, and the lake became a narrative of Black excellence and empowerment, a lesson that would echo for generations, carried in the ripples of water that marked the shoreline of a man who refused to be underestimated and who turned injustice into triumph.